So my name is Sally Jeffrey. I'm the partner that leads PricewaterhouseCoopers Middle East education practice. So I'm a consultant to the educational sector. So we see problems in the educational sector from a number of angles. We work with ministers of labour that see skill gaps. We work with employers that see skill gaps. And we also work with the actual providers of education themselves. So I'm not a traditional educationalist. We look more at the business of education, but we have some different perspectives. And it's clear that there are some significant gaps. One of the trends we're seeing is a lot of employers getting into the business of education, particularly here in the Middle East, where the higher education system is not addressing skill gaps. The employers are actually getting into the business of education themselves and looking at establishing their own universities. So that's clearly a symptom of a serious problem in the region. I'd just like to clarify a couple of things. When we talk about higher education here today, we're taking a fairly broad definition of higher education. So we're going to encompass everything that's basically post-secondary. So that includes, of course, classical tertiary education, but we're also hoping to hear from our panelists on vocational and technical education. So basically anything post-secondary. I think if we can keep a fairly broad definition. Before introducing the panel, we were going to have a representative from STIR to remind us about an innovation, a grassroots innovation with respect to teaching mathematics in a community setting. So I'm just checking to see whether the representative from STIR is here. Please, come on up. So I'd like to introduce you to Bindu Kumari, who I understand is a teacher from India and will be sharing with us a particularly innovative story.
Thank you very much. My name is Bindu Kumari Bhatia, and I'm a teacher at SR Capital Public School in Delhi. It's a privilege to be here in Dubai representing teachers, not just from India, but teachers across the world working, as I am to be a teacher change maker. I work as a teacher in a country with many challenges, like large class sizes, lack of focus on learning outcome, and the shortage of teachers. But like many other teachers, I won't change, and I believe that I can contribute to this change by innovating in my own school. So to keep us focused on ground realities and the importance of teachers being a part of the solution to education reform, I would like to share one idea that one of my colleague teacher has developed to improve the learning outcome. She is Geeta Joshi. Geeta realized that her students' understanding of mathematical concept is often surface level, and that they fail to develop the deeper knowledge that is required for true learning. So to overcome this problem, Geeta asked her students to collect data through surveys in the community and in other classrooms, and then she makes use of that data in teaching statistics and other mathematics lessons. Therefore, she increasing the relevance of learning. For example, her students collect data of 50 people in the community about the color they like. And then Geeta teaches and uses that data for teaching the children how to make pie charts, bar graphs, and etc. So thus, Geeta tries to relate every mathematical unit to the practical work, which is very much essential for the true learning and to clear all mathematical concepts. So this idea is really very interesting, and Geeta reports that for the days that she teaches maths using these practical techniques, 100% of the students attend. They attend the class, and on test she reports that very high percentage of the students pass following this kind of technique. So thank you very much, and enjoy the panel discussion, and thank you for your kind attention, please. Thank you.
So I'd now like to introduce our panelists. And first of all, we have Dejan Bojanic. Apologize if I've mispronounced your name. Dejan is from the UN Global Education First Initiative, which is a youth advocacy group. He's from Serbia. So this group, for those of you who were here last night, basically advises the UN on education reform. Dejan is in his second year of economics in Belgrade. And I asked him what he was aspiring to do when he left university. And he wants to develop new and innovative education programs. So he's going to have lots of interesting things to share with us, I'm sure. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Patrick Kisya. Patrick is the Group Executive Chairman for the Construction Credit Trust in Kenya. This trust has in particular led the way for introducing practical training for youth and women in the construction industry in Kenya. In addition, he is Honorary Secretary and Council Member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators in Kenya, and also a corporate member of the Architectural Association of Kenya and a member of the Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Welcome, Patrick. Next, we have Dr. Mohammed Sama Amar, who is the Ambassador and Permanent Delegate of Egypt to UNESCO. So Dr. Amar has been closely connected to UNESCO since 2000, representing Egypt on a number of international committees and in negotiations concerning several UNESCO conventions, notably those concerning underwater cultural heritage, intangible cultural heritage, and the diversity of cultural expressions. Fascinating. He holds a PhD in international law from the London School of Economics and a master's degree in public and private law from Cairo University. Welcome, Dr. Amar. And finally, we have Dr. Blade Zimande. Dr. Zimande has been, the South African Minister for Higher Education and Training since 2009. He has a doctorate degree in philosophy, specializing in sociology. He completed a psychology honors degree at the University of Natal and a master's degree in industrial psychology. And more recently has been awarded a PhD for a thesis in the field of personnel management. He's also a lecturer in industrial psychology at the University of Zululand. Welcome, Dr. Zimande. I'd now like to ask our panelists, each in turn, to spend a few minutes talking about their point of view on the role that higher education is currently playing in addressing the needs of employers in the community. And I'd like them, given the previous discussions that we had, to try to share with us some very practical examples of where you think higher education, in its broadest sense, could do a better job to meet the needs of both the students and the employers and the economies in which they play an important role. So, Dejan, would you like to kick off?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and also just the fact that every single panel at this forum involves a young person is very complimentary, so thank you for that. This is not really the context in which young people have been mentioned when talking about developing new educational policies, because usually what happens when talking about the new paradigm of education is that young people are being blamed. We are in a way being blamed that we are failing to give companies the workforce that they require for. We are being blamed that the education, the kind of education we are getting, is not really lowering all those high unemployment rates everywhere around the world. And it seems like the problem has now been shifted from the labor market to the students, making us feel more guilty and insufficient and unprepared for jobs and unprepared for society. We got a chance to listen yesterday and during this afternoon and morning how everyone is talking about how education does not fulfill the demands of the labor market, and no one seemed to think about education as a human right. No one seemed to say, oh, we need to change education so it really develops the personality of a person and identity of the person. It seems like companies have now outsourced their training centers for employees into schools. And very soon, I'm afraid that we're going to have education which is really a factory, similar to Ford's factory from previous century, but now instead of like having black cars, we're going to have mass production of ready-to-use workers who are there just to pay the tax and just to obey to the demands of the labor market. Thank you. Thank you, and I'm really happy that everyone agrees here, because this is not very often that people from government and from the business sector agree with this. And the business sector and government seem to also kind of agree on the fact that there is this mismatch of skills. They often say mismatch of skills, they use this term. But what we think is that there is indeed the mismatch, and the only mismatch that we see is the mismatch between what young people want and what is the offer that educational institutions are giving to them. Because this is a very big problem, and this is something that really needs to be solved. You asked all of us here if we would have like a blank page to develop a new higher education system, what kind of skills do we think are important to be taught there? And so, first of all, to say that it's really hard to develop a higher education system from scratch, but it's important to also look at all the beginning as to make sure that schools are accessible for everyone from very early age, because we have millions of children that are out of school. So, first of all, we need to make sure that accessible education and quality education is free from everyone. But for higher education specifically, it is always important to have young people who are able to learn, who are able to adapt, who are able to think critically. So I was thinking about 3 sets of skills that are important to mention and important to be taught at higher education. The first set of skills I would say that are those skills that young people find relevant and find needed for their own personal development. The second set of skills would rather be not so much skills but competences, and they would be transversal competences such as critical thinking, problem solving, entrepreneurial skills, and entrepreneurship education, for example, has now been quite a fad, and a lot of people are supporting it, and I think there is a reason why we should support entrepreneurship education, but not only because of the business creation, but more for the sake that it develops like self-initiative of young people, innovation, creative thinking, self-confidence of young people. And then finally, the third set of skills that I find very important are those skills that are not necessarily gained inside a classroom, but outside a classroom. For example, through non-formal education activities, volunteering in an NGO, just doing a voluntary work. I think that these skills need to be kind of accepted by formal education systems, and the higher value should be given to those. So yeah, those are the kind of 3 skills that I've put important in a higher education system. And then finally, what I'd like to say is that people are talking a lot about like private and public sector kind of working together. And rarely anyone is really thinking about cooperation between young people and policymakers when, you know, we are to develop new educational policies. It seems like young people are still considered to be just slackers who don't care anything that's not flavorous, and that's really not trivial. But I can assure you that partnership between young people and policymakers is really the only way to increase the knowledge, skills, abilities, and social competencies of citizens of the world.
Thank you very much, Dejan. Before we move on to the other panelists, because I'd like to try and ground this discussion a bit more in some good examples of things in action, can you give us an example of a program you're familiar with, or maybe something you've been through yourself, where you might have picked up some of these skills that you'd like to see more of in higher education?
Well, it seems like a lot of educational systems already do those who encourage young people to criticize their surroundings, who encourage young people to criticize everything that's around them, and who develops them to decide, to make their own decisions, who involve them in, for example, voting in school boards, and similar. It seems to have great outcomes, because if we would teach one person to only get prepared for one job that they may or may not get in 20 years from now, it is really hard to assess what kind of job that is. Because unless we want to gaze into a crystal ball, which is a bit dodgy, but it's really impossible to predict what are the future jobs. But rather, if we just have educational system, which are many education systems of Scandinavian countries do teach young people to think critically and to kind of be able to learn how to learn and how to adapt. And so these kind of education systems, I think, perform very well.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, we'll open up for questions once all the panelists have had a chance to share their views. So, Mr. Kissia, would you like to share with us your views on how higher education can reform in this area, and with some practical examples, if you can?
Thank you. As chairman of Construction Credit Trust, or CCT in short, we believe that university education has its place in developing and graduating a young person, say at 25 years old. We believe that there is a part that life then picks on that graduate, and within 75 years of age, at retirement, at sitting back at home, there is a totality of a further exposure that that engineer has gone through within that time. We believe that there is that portion of a life growth. To some people, it may possibly translate into experience. We do not believe so at CCT. We believe that there is a piece of preparedness that that engineer has gone through. It may not be possible even to give a name to it, but we believe that that engineer at 75 years old has then a role to play in being able to translate the 25-year-old engineer into a better person. So at CCT, what we have done is to identify the form of skill development post-graduation, which then the engineer must go through to prepare that engineer properly for the labor market. We are therefore having to reach out to the retired persons with the skill and linking up those people with the younger graduates, and to enable proper tutelage of the younger graduates into a people better skilled to address the labor market. We believe that the universities are doing a good job, but there is a way in which the universities and colleges must prepare the younger people into wild thinking. They must allow themselves to think outside of their mainstream line, just like my fellow panelists has indicated, because there is then the part of talent that would be embedded in that young engineer that must then be prepared into the fuller person to serve the labor market. And so at CCT, we have developed a program which then translates skill to the younger people. The African problem of unemployment may not be unique just to Africa, but for Africa, there is a bigger problem of failure to have formal education, particularly for younger school dropouts who may never even attain a university paper, university education. And so similarly, we believe that those young school dropouts have the possibility of being developed in the line of skill and into a people that eventually fit into the labor market. But to be able to adequately serve the market, there must be a form of certification which then informs the labor market on their level of skill. So what CCT has done is to get into a partnership with James Skills Africa in handling a theoretical part of development of these young people, and then have a program of the younger people working out a practical training for the young people and the women, with the aim of then preparing them properly for the labor market. But CCT doesn't stop there. CCT then goes ahead to give them placement within the business sector. So CCT therefore prepares entrepreneurs and who would then reach out and under very careful management, very careful preparation to then enable them to get into business and therefore attain the fuller dream that we would expect younger people to attain. So CCT has begun off in Kenya, but we would think that our approach is available not just to the developing world, but also similarly in the developing world where the lack of employment is becoming a bigger concern for young people, and in terms of Africa, for women also. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Dr. Amar.
First of all, thank you for the introduction. And I would like, first of all, to start my intervention by some introductory points that will help us to discuss this matter and elaborate it in a way. Let me start with you by saying that higher education in general, I don't think that we are addressing this crucial issue from a fair point of view. Because higher education in Europe, for instance, is totally different from the system of higher education in a region like Africa or the Arab region. But if I may intervene here, and I'm not a diplomat, I'm a professor of international law, but it happens that I have this assignment as a diplomat. But I'm a professor of international law at Cairo University, and I can give you the real problems that we face in one of the most largest universities in the region, in the Arab region. The problem starts with the admission system to university. If you talk about the higher education, the product, the input, how we can admit the students. Here we have a problem because according to the system we follow, for instance, in Egypt, the admission process, it's based on the grades of the students coming from the high school. And they are distributed among the colleges and universities based on their grades. So it is not necessarily to find a student who's doing, for instance, law, who likes to do law from the first point of view. Or whoever is doing art, for instance, it's not necessarily that he wants to do art. So the problem that you direct the students not according to their skills or what they want to do, but it's the central system that you distribute the students to the universities. And from this point, that the output is not guaranteed the one that he is convinced that he or she is doing the right thing, and he does not expect that he will find any opportunity in the labor market. And when we move to labor market, what market we are talking about? It's at national level or at regional level or international level. Because it's not necessarily that you have job opportunities for everyone who's graduated from universities. In a country like mine, where we have more than maybe 2 or 3 million students at universities, it is not easy to find the job opportunities for them later on. So this is also, you need to see a kind of dialogue at governmental level between the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research from one side and Labor Ministry from the other side, or Industry Ministry from the other side, because you need to see and expect what in 4 years' time or 10 years' time or 20 years' time people working in the industry or investors, what they expect from the universities. Other problem that we face because of the large number of the students, that we don't have a training system in the university. So students and professors are completely isolated from the needs of the market. So the most important thing for them is that that the student gets the certificate, and then they don't think what will happen to him or her thereafter. Just he got the certificate, and this is we done our role as university. But we need to bridge the relation between the government, the universities, and the market. And here the private sector should play a role in helping the universities by providing them some assignments. Let's have, if we have a research unit in the universities, and private sector, they go and seek the advice of these research units or centers, then the people, the professors at the university will understand how the people outside the fence of the university expect or do in the real life. So they can adapt their curriculum based on the needs of the external world of the universities. It's not only academic syllabus. It should be a technical knowledge and improve skills as well.
And what do you think are some of the constraints against that happening today? I mean, it sounds to me like a very common sense thing to be happening. So why is it not happening more in your experience?
It is not happening because they don't believe that the graduate from the university can be of their help later on. And here, if you see that we have two systems, we have the governmental universities, public universities, and the private universities. And I can notice that people from the private sector are more in contact with the private universities than with the governmental universities. And that's why the graduates from the private university, they find more job opportunities when they are graduated, more than the public universities. Okay. There is a kind of gap between those who are administrating the public universities and the private sector. This is not the case with the private universities, because sometimes people, the investors and people working in the private sector, they fund the private universities. They are in a close relationship with the private universities, which is not necessarily the case with the public universities. So training programs is needed, for sure. We need to integrate people from the private sectors to address the students from time to time in the universities. It is not only that we have theoretical subjects that you have to follow this textbook and you have to pass the exam, but you need to integrate the private, to ask them to come to the universities and to address the students. If you do law, then what we expect from you when you will be a lawyer. If you do engineering, what we expect from you when you will be graduated as engineering. This gap, we should work on it to make it close between the universities and private. Okay. That's all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amar. Dr. Zimande.
Thank you very much, Sally, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this panel. Our approach to the question at hand from the standpoint of South Africa is that the way we see higher education is shaped by what we have defined as one of the biggest challenges that we face, which is not unique to South Africa. Large numbers of 15 to 24-year-olds who are not in education, not in employment, and not in training. And it's rising, the challenge of youth unemployment. So that is how we have located the immediate challenge for higher education. And in response to that, well, the second thing I need to say, we're coming from a country that has had a history of a brutal system of racial oppression and exclusion of the majority, which tended to exacerbate these challenges. So after 15 years after our democracy at the end of apartheid, then government decided that one of the better ways to respond to this challenge is actually to split the education department. We used to have one Department of Education. 2009, we split it into two, basic education and higher education. And the mandate of the Department of Higher Education, well, basic focuses on schooling in the main, and the mandate of the Department of Higher Education and Training is not so much higher education than post-school education and training. That's a concept that we've introduced, and we're seeking to hang around our response. For example, here we are talking about addressing the needs of not only those who have finished school who want to go to university, but the needs of those who want to take vocational trade pathways, those who have never been to school, who want literacy courses, those who left school early and may want some short skill here and there in order to be able to make a living. The trick, however, is that this post-school education and training system must be diverse, because we've had the challenge in South Africa of everyone wanting to go to university, which is not possible. Also, given what we inherited from the British education system. So the system must be diverse, accessible, differentiated, but the trick is that it must also be of quality and articulated. In other words, when we are looking at, for instance, what makes up the post-school education and training system, it's your colleges, whether they are vocational colleges, nursing colleges, agricultural colleges, but we have universities. We are also introducing a new type, which is a community college. We are also talking about learnerships, those students who may leave school and be able to get 12 months work experience and so on. That's the diversity. But the things must talk to each other, because part of the problems we've had is to have dead-end qualifications. You go to a college, you pick up a qualification, you pass, it doesn't take you anywhere. Often doesn't give you a job or means of creating your own employment, and it doesn't allow you to go to university. So the issue of articulation in that context becomes even more important. Now, maybe to come closer then also to this issue of partnerships that we are referring to. Firstly, our point of departure in South Africa is the same as that of UNESCO, that education is a common public good. But it requires a whole range of role players, including government and the private sector. Our emphasis now is that in order for our education to be relevant post-school, I'm emphasizing that, we see the universities also within that context. If I may just make a very quick example, for instance, we would like to see our universities doing more research on how to improve our vocational education and training system, so that we don't have islands of institutions in this broader post-school sector. But what we are emphasizing at the moment is the pathway between school, college, university into the workplace, including workplace training, by the way, which is part of education where also the private sector has a role. But we would like to see more placement of students. Let me end by maybe answering the question whether we should go the vocational or the applied pathway by saying the question more is that we need both. And it's, even if you are following a vocational pathway, I agree with Deon, you mustn't produce robots, you must produce human beings who have got thinking skills, analytical skills, critical skills, and active citizens, by the way, which is also very important, and also important for adaptability, that you don't just train people for particular sets of jobs, which if they change, they can't adapt. But even if we are following a general academic direction, we must also promote work-integrated learning, because we believe it is very important that we expose our youngsters to the workplace. We are emphasizing, saying to industry, the private sector, give us more spaces, for instance, for our college and university students to have learnerships, to have experience. Mm-hmm. That is the emphasis that we are putting at this point in time in order to try and create this diverse system. Employers always complain everywhere and say the universities are not giving us the right kinds of graduates. My answer is simply, well, what's your role in ensuring also that, because sometimes often the quality and relevance of our education system is as good as the ability of the private sector to open its own workplaces as places to actually expose our youngsters, so that we can have a much more of a relevant post-school education and training system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, gentlemen. That was very, very interesting. I'd now like to open up to the floor. and give people the opportunity to ask questions of our panelists. And if I could ask you to introduce yourself briefly and then ask your question, and also at the request of the translators, if we can speak more slowly, because they're struggling to keep up back there. There should be there's a microphone coming up here.
I just would like to give an example.
Can you introduce yourself first,
yes.
please?
My name is Malih Al-Yaman. I am the founder and director for Young Leaders Development Program. We're having, by the way, 60 young leaders attending this Congress. I want to give an example, really practical one, and I'm just talking about the program, which is only 3 years old. For example, today we're having 60 young leaders attending, as I said, and we had hard time to convince the parents in the school to let them come to this Congress, thinking that they're going to be missing some math and science or whatever. So last week they were in Burj Al Arab attending the 17th Global Women Leaders. At the beginning of this month, they went monitoring alone, 21 young leaders, the voting process for 330 top classic cars from all over the world, and they give them this at Sheikh Mohammed Boulevard, downtown Dubai, and they trust them completely over the whole process. Next week, they're going to be working on this international light festival. I'm just giving an example very quickly how much the youth, if they're giving the chance, what they can do. And those, I think there's this skills they're learning a lot more valuable from what they're learning from the books and so on. As a matter of fact, I sent my son to United States last year to attend some workshops and 3 months at the DigiPen Institute of Technology in Seattle. And he came back and he told me something really funny. He said, "Dad, now I know why we learn math and physics." I said, "Wow, what a discovery. Why?" He said, "Because that's all what we use to create games, 3Ds and 2D games." So imagine the school system here, they don't really teach the value, why we're learning what we're learning. So that's why we really need the integration of such programs with the education system to bridge this big gap which is really created. And you're absolutely right. Our students are not ready for the work when they finish. As a matter of fact, what our vision in the program, to start when they finish, when they graduate, to start with other people hope to finish, which is mean our young people have the potential, the brain, the capability, everything to start where other people can finish their career. And that's what we really want in the education system to do.
Thank you, and I must congratulate you because I was ambushed by 6 of them when I was being interviewed outside, and they were certainly very bold and very courageous, so congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Please, yes, gentlemen, sir.
My name is Paramjit Pabi. I'm the Group HR Director of a large group in Africa, in Nigeria, called Dangote Group. I've been hearing two very interesting insights from the panel in the area of vocational skills vis-a-vis the tertiary education or life skills which you get from higher education. I would like to, in fact, share our own personal experience. We are a very large and a very fast-going group. 4 years ago, when we did a strategic plan for our next 5 years, we realized that the basic constraints to our growth is going to be people. It's not the markets, it's not the technology, and it's not the money, it's people and skills.
Can you just confirm for the audience what sector your business is in?
Well, we are a large conglomerate which is into cement, oil refining, fertilizers, foods, etc. Okay. We are about a $5 billion group, the largest in Africa at the moment, and growing fast. Now, what I want to share is that when we started mapping the labor market to understand the kind of skills available in the market, when we went to the tertiary institutions to understand the kind of people that were available from the colleges, we realized to our dismay that the kind of skills that we needed were just not prevalent. They were not available. So what we had just two choices, either to stop growth or to build the kind of skills we needed. So obviously we had to choose the second. And we have, over the last 4 years, developed a Dangote Academy, where we train people on the kind of skills that our business needs. We pick the best from the institutions because we believe that the quality of raw material finally determines the end product, and therefore the best people we pick through a very rigorous selection process. We train them through a very good process of training, and then at the end of the program we take them within the group because that's what we need. But this started as a business imperative, but we have gone beyond, where we have said that only 60% of the people that we train are going to be absorbed in the group, and the balance, 40%, is just given to industry. So that is the corporate social response to the country. And what I would like to say now, I heard the panel say that the industry doesn't go to the higher institutions to understand or to tell them what skills are needed. Unfortunately, I think the apathy is more from the higher education side. They are training citizens of the future. They need to make sure that these people are employable and have the right skills. The industry can go to them, all right, but I'm sure the higher education and the education system needs to come to industry to say, what kind of people would you need in the next 5 to 10 years? Can we produce and can we build a co-curriculum to design those kind of people which the industry requires? Surely there are not many employers like ours who go out and build skills for themselves and for others. There is apathy from the employers as well, I'm not denying that. But there has to be a dialogue between the academia and the industry to understand what kind of skills are needed for today and tomorrow and train people in those skills. And obviously the industry should build and make available platforms for training them. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Please, yes, lady at the front.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Miliana from International House Dubai. We are a training institute, so my question to the panelists would be sort of related to the question of the gentleman and comments from the gentleman before, is how do you see the in-house trainings that the companies provide after people have been employed? Mostly maybe relevant to Mr. Zimande from South Africa. Do you see it as a quick fix, or do you see it as a potential to help bridge that gap? Thank you.
Mr. Zimande, do you want to respond?
Yes. Sorry, I didn't realize that you have given us a chance to respond. Well, if I may start precisely with this question, we are of the view, the last question, we are of the view that workplace training is absolutely important. For example, in South Africa, we have established a new quality council, which we call the Quality Council on Trades and Occupations. One of whose functions is to try and relate accumulated work experience to formal qualifications, so that what you acquire in the workplace can also build towards a further qualification, for instance. But the workplace is not only important for that. The second thing that the workplace must do is that it must provide an entry, the pipeline from colleges and universities, as I had said, to become a training space for youngsters to be able to acquire. So it's both for workers who are already working, as well as for new workers who are coming in, or new potential workers, which relates to the question from the gentleman who has a company in Nigeria. And I would really just like to say that what we are also trying to do in South Africa, by way of example, we are trying to stop this thing of second guessing between supply and demand. Why should employers and universities and colleges, for instance, second guess each other about what the universities must do that is wanted by employers? Why do we do that? Shout like across the fence. So one of the things that we are introducing is what we call occupational teams. Very briefly, by way of example, for instance, take one occupation, profession or trade, electrician or electrical engineer. Bring all the people who are involved in that together into one room, or they can link with computers these days, to say, do we have enough supply of electricians or electrical engineers? Where are the blockages? What kind of curricula is relevant? That is also what must be promoted, that employers, public and private sector, must participate in curriculum development in the institutions. So through this, then we are saying, what should they be taught? And then what are the obstacles in the workplace? Engineers, for instance, we find that they stay for 9, 10 years after qualifying from university. They are not registered because they are not given adequate exposure. So therefore, if you bring all this, both the users of electricians or electrical engineers and the suppliers, we are able then to say, let's not second guess, this is what is supposed to happen. These are the changes that must be introduced by colleges or universities. So we think that is very critical in trying to actually shorten and obviate this particular program. I must say that establishing an academy is something that must be welcomed by the private sector, academies that are going to contribute to training. The trick is, what we're trying to do to South Africa is that those academies must not just be in-house company. They are, yes, but also must link with the rest of the college or university system so that there is sharing of knowledge and also ensuring sustainability of training in the system beyond just individual companies.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
My question is, before that, I'm sorry. My name is Anthony Joseph. I'm the principal of the GEMS Millennium School, Sharjah.
Welcome.
My question is, the first one is directed to Mr. Dijan. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. You say, it's all very well to say that universities are now churning out ready-to-use graduates. Now, talking about the business and the labor market, business and the labor market want ready-to-use people. So you really can't blame the university for churning out that way. But having said that, His Excellency Zimande, you're very correct by saying, sir, that we have to have a curricula that suits the labor market and the private sector. I say, when a particular person goes to a university and learns a particular set of skills, by the time he finishes the university course and goes to the labor market, his set of skills that he's already learned have become completely irrelevant to the changes that have already taken place within those 4 or 5 years. Your comment on that, sir. Thank you very much.
Do you want me to just reflect on, I mean, yes, you said that companies do want ready-to-use ready-to-use workers, but I mean, who even gave the mandate to companies to dictate what kind of workers they want? I think if there's a right willingness from governments, I mean, they would then be more clear of what kind of young people are there developing, and then the labor market and companies should then be those who would be more adopted to them, and would then also open their companies more, for example, quality internships of young people and finding other ways in which young people can still gain skills that they need. But still, they cannot be the only one to say what kind of workers they need, and then the school just prepares what they've demanded.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a very interesting point, this idea that employer academies tend to be a bit more product focused. They know what product they want, but they're not educationalists by background, and so understanding how you actually create that product is something where I think the traditional higher education sector needs to play a role. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask this lady in the front here, because she's been patiently putting her hand up and down for a few minutes now, and then I'll get to some other questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Actually, it's just to facilitate Mr. Burjanik, who wanted to have some kind of form of communication between the youth and policymakers. I've been lucky enough to work with some very, very creative young people who, when they're put in a room and asked to think about a problem, they come up with all kinds of amazing and interesting ways of solving them. So my question would be for you. What do you propose? What does the youth, in your vision, need and want from employers? Because I know a lot of employers who spend a lot of time and energy recruiting the best amongst the youth. And so what are you looking for? I believe some of it is flexi hours, that kind of idea, but I'm putting it to you. What is it that you're looking for?
I mean, I think that quality employment, which then respects the needs of an individual, would be very important. Employment which is social responsible, employment which then gives very good internship opportunities for young people to train, but not the kind of internships where they train people to solely work on the machines that they have, but to really have mentors who are pedagogues also, not only experts, but also who know how to approach a person to give them education and not to solely make them work on one machine that they in that company have. Would be some of the things that employers should offer to young people.
We've actually only got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask fantastic questions, and thank you everybody for participating, but I'm going to ask our panelists just to take a couple of minutes each, well, sort of 1.25 minutes each, just with a few passing comments. And the challenge is, if you were to provide one piece of advice to a Minister of Education who's got a blank piece of paper and needs to fill some lacking capacity in the higher education system today, blank piece of paper, needs to develop a new institute, what piece of advice would you give them? Diane? Actually, no, Diane, I'm sorry, we'll start this end, because give you a bit of a break.
Well, maybe let them start. I'm Minister of Education, so I need to hear them first, before I respond.
Bit of free advice, okay. Mr. Kissia, would you like to start first?
Yes, I think on the issue of workplace training, and I think His Excellency is really right to say that being in government, he may be limited in terms of therefore engaging from the side of the private sector. I think that from the private sector side, I would encourage governments to go slow on workplace training for the reason that workplace training would tend towards limiting open thinking, because then when you train the people for the Barclays Bank, then you'd want to train the people into the way Barclays Bank works, rather than training the people to fit into the open market and be able to work wherever else.
So that's your advice, you train people to fit into the open market, adaptability, flexibility.
Yes, rather than limiting the trainees.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ara.
I will first of all tell the minister that public universities consume a lot of money, so you invest in this education. So you must make sure that the product will find its way after the students, they find their way after they are graduated. I will tell them that if you want to, there is some efforts by the ministers and governments to ensure the quality assurance, but the quality assurance of the curriculum made by the universities, and they do the quality assurance by themselves. They have to get the private sector also as a part of the assessment to make sure that the quality assurance is the right thing to do. I will advise to encourage universities to have a kind of unit-win programs with other universities in different parts of the world. So by this we can exchange experience. And then I will advise that to follow a kind of a sabbatical leave to the professors in the university and lecturers in universities. Every 5 years, every 7 years, they give them a kind of 6 months sabbatical leave and ask them to go to work and see how the private sector is doing, and then they can follow up what they. And by this we close the gap, because now we started to see whom to be blamed. Is the private sector, they don't go to the universities, or the academia, they don't go to the private sector. We have to find
push them together.
To push them together and to find a middle way that they can meet and discuss. That's all I can say from that.
Diane, final, you and then the minister.
Yeah, well, I would advise the minister and also all the other ministers to, first of all, not take decisions by themselves, but to really get into a structured dialogue with young people, to not only consult them, but to involve them in every single step of making that blank paper something useful for the society, for education, including also taking the final decision upon the new educational program. So that would be first thing. And second thing, what always needs to be bear in mind, to look at education really as a process when you transform all the abilities, talents, and interests that young people have into desirable outcomes for themselves. So these two would be my advice.
Thank you for the advice. It's well taken, Sally. Just very briefly, thank you very much. I think maybe just quickly to say to the gentleman who was saying employers need ready-made people. You're absolutely correct, we agree. But we have to define what we mean by ready-made. And what I was trying to say is that ready-made is ability to do the job, but also capacity to learn and develop, so that there is this adaptability. But also, if I may end by being provocative a little bit, when the world economy begins to pick up, employment also tends to go up. And employers employ the very same people that they complain that they are not quite adequately skilled. What do they do, if we can reflect on that? One of the things they do is retraining and retooling. But when times are tough, they tend to be reluctant. Why don't we also look at those mechanisms, even when times are difficult, so that the Nigerian company won't go out of business if you are able to retrain? Take someone from one trade or occupation or area and retrain that person to actually do something else. I would give you lots of examples in South Africa, but I do not have, unfortunately, enough time to be able to do that. The last and most important message, perhaps, what are the appropriate forms of cooperation to advance university and vocational education amongst all the role players? I agree with Deon. At least as a minister, I meet with my student organizations and worker organizations 2 or 3 times a year, those that are organizing in education, student organizations in our universities, because I believe that we mustn't do things for youth. It's normally better to do things with the youth. It does not mean, of course, that sometimes you don't have to say to the youth, but we think you're out of order here. But we should be able to say we must do things with them. So mechanisms for cooperation between industry and educational institutions on an ongoing and sustainable basis, that's one of the issues that we have got to grapple with, so that we don't second guess each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.